The end is nigh. I just can't figure out if it's a good or bad thing. There is a lot going on right now in the world. It's impacting forecasts, supply chain, and you. So let's get to it. Welcome. Another fabulous episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your pessimistic, hopeful, and still here host, Eric Wilson. Find me at eric@ibf.org. Reach out to me at eric@ibf.org. I was recently asked, what do you do for the fall? I was thinking bunker, preps, and then I finally figured out they were actually talking about autumn. That's where we are. So welcome to our fourth season now, where I'm back for season number 4. So you all really must know something that I don't. No, seriously. What do you want? What do you know? And the reason you keep going for 4 seasons now at this podcast and supporting us. Tell me. I want to know. It's at eric@ibf.org, eric@ibf.org, or comment down below. Reach out to me. Let me understand exactly what you want in season 4. What kind of topics, guests, do you see going forward? Happy to, for the next 12 episodes, entertain your thoughts as the audience, because this is for you. It's the reason I'm doing this. Let me know exactly what you're looking for out of this. We do have exciting news about a sponsor. It's still Arkiva, your one-plan s&op software solution. They lead up for the next 12 episodes, so you get to hear me say, our sponsor, Arkiva, your one-plan s&op software solution, for the next 12 episodes now as well. I said there is a lot going on right now in the world. Cargo is piling up in the California ports. I mean, right now there's hundreds of ships that are docked, not being able to get in. 40% of all imports, it'd be imports. 40% of all imports are coming in, come through that port right now, which is backed up. We see a labor shortage right now. Moving things intercontinental, it's causing problems. Even after you get into the port, being able to move things around are causing problems right now because of labor shortages. There's massive shortages of toilet paper and other goods again. We're seeing bare shelves in retail right now. We are seeing the resurgence of chaos, supply chain issues, and problems. And these won't be solved probably till the end of 2022, the way we're going right now. So my question is, why? Why are we seeing these problems? Can we blame this all on COVID? Is forecasting actually at fault? Or is there something else that really we can start pointing to and saying maybe wasn't prepared because of what we didn't know and what we didn't plan for? Like everything else, I got a very special guest to talk about this today. He's kind of been my mentor, my supply chain guru that I've gone to over the years. He's been connected to my career path all the way since the very beginning. Jake Barr is the CEO and principal at BlueWorld Supply Chain Consulting. He has almost 12 years of experience at Procter & Gamble solving many of their most difficult global supply chain issues. He's a graduate of the University of Kentucky. He currently serves as a research associate at MIT. He's advisor at UK, University of Kentucky MBA and Gatton Supply Chain Forum. I work with him there. He brought me on board there. And he's also a bourbon aficionado and a supply chain expert as well. Please help me welcome Jake. So welcome, Jake. I'm happy to have you on board.
Hey, Eric. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I think our paths crossed quite a few times during my career. So thank you for a lot you've done to inspire and inform me through my career, and happy to have you to share those insights with the audience now.
I am glad to be here today. So let's get to it.
Let's get to it. So the world is burning around us. Everything's happening wrong in the supply chain world. We keep seeing headlines, and that's why I wanted to bring those headlines into this podcast now. What exactly is going on that is kind of impacting now, but the future for supply chain planning, Christmas, everything?
Let's start with the more basic premise, and that is, supply chains to a great degree are built to allow for a certain level of variability, right? Much like putting together a demand forecast, right? But at the end of the day, what we're seeing is that you are having a higher level of variability across multiple nodes and partners of the supply chain than has ever previously been experienced. So most supply chains are built for allowing you to deal with a disruption. Typically, it'll happen somewhere in the supply side, and therefore you are either buffering it with a base level of inventory, right? Stashed away someplace in a plant or a DC or whatever. And that's great. I mean, that can work. But unfortunately, we have I call it this big vortex of things that were in the midst of being moved around for the last few years. You touched on one earlier before we went live on, we have a lot of people that have done great work around Lean and Six Sigma, around plants or DC operations, et cetera. And unfortunately, the implications of that is they were leaning out one segment of the supply system, the ecosystem, without necessarily looking at what is the resilience change that is necessary in the other partners, in the other co-mans, co-packers, material tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. If I choose to lean out or really focus on a fast, agile response in the one. So it's a combination of things, Eric, unfortunately, but to get to the business impact of it, it's going to be huge in the months ahead. I'm working with companies across 6 different industry verticals, and I have, meetings with executive teams where they're going, hey, can you give us, we think we're coming out the back end of the curve. And I'm going, no, you're not. This thing, you're going to see implications of it continue through the middle of next year. And that's the best forecast I can give you. And that assumes that we're starting to get back to a level of stability on some second tier manufacturing, both overseas and domestically, which honestly, for the first part of September, I'm not very confident in, because I'm not seeing it come back the way it is, because it needs to, because it also is experiencing not only we're having regional issues still pop up, as an example in the US with COVID penetrations, taking workforces offline. We've had a ripple effect on that on factory production levels and efficiency, output, yield rates on everything. I'll tell a story on myself just recently. I had what would amount to be a kiss of a bumper with a big elevated truck in the area where I live, okay? And unfortunately, it punctured through the skin on my bumper and did a little bit of work on my grill, because I wasn't jacked up and sat up as high as that other. So Eric, what would have, in a normal non-pandemic and a normal supply chain response base, resulted in about, based on what my checks were, around $2,000 or so worth of parts, is now $8,400 because of the cost of sourcing and expediting. Because
I say nothing's in stock either, right?
None of it is in stock. It all has to be sourced, by the way. And we have a huge disruption in the placement of not only air freight capacity, ocean freight capacity, to be able to deal with moving. And these are, again, so it's like a giant bowl of spaghetti at the moment. No matter where you put your hand into the bowl, it's going to feel ugly. It is going to feel ugly.
So what I'm hearing there is uncertainty, across the board, all the way down to tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. That bowl of spaghetti feels ugly. So what I'm hearing then, it's not necessarily forecast fault then.
I always love to blame you for a lot of things, but in this case, I can't. Okay. So it is not a forecast driven thing, but I'm going to tell you, the the members of your podcast that are listening in from a forecast and analytics standpoint actually have the opportunity to help lead the way out of this. And here's why, because a number of the companies I'm working with, we're really having very strategic discussions around assortment right now. And here's why. So I'll go back to the very first point we were talking about. We're actually taking apart their business model and identifying which portions of their portfolio actually have the best levels of resiliency. And we're paring down, for example, in this case, a huge food-based company into a very tight, short portfolio of SKUs they're going to offer to their strategic partners to get them back to plus 99% service levels, because we've walked the supply chain back and understand that if we choose these items, we do have a tight multi-source supply chain for sourcing the ingredients. We've got adequate capacity for the packaging. We have no constraints on the ability to get it distributed. So we're literally in the midst, from a demand planning process all the way through, segmenting and chopping down the portfolio lineup during this interim period as a way of bringing stability back to the segmented business model.
So that sounds like a great strategy for them, and especially if they're working for you, I'm sure it's going to be a great implementation as well. But back to what we were talking about is that lean kind of happening in silos, and when you have these shock events, the black swans, really it's disruptive, especially when you don't have a resilient and a lot of things in your pipeline to be able to react to it. My concern now is overreaction. I'm seeing companies, 2022, is it going to be the year of anti-lean and inventory? Is that what we're going to see?
I can already predict for you that we've had some companies that have exacerbated what you will see in a bullwhip effect, where they have actually bet on the come, old school kind of thinking, where they had the opportunity to go buy some stuff and they've just gone bonkers on buying stuff. Now, Eric, as you know, that's a one-way ticket to going out of business sale, because if you're trying to do that without the connection to understanding whether the market really wants what you think you can get supply for, that is huge Russian roulette game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of Costco, I just read they bought 3 ships. They're buying bulk now. I mean, Costco is a bulk type supplier, but they're buying the vessels with the containers to bring over now in batches. That's got to be a recipe for inventory mix issues and excess inventory.
Well, it's not only that, but Eric, they are one of many that have actually got into the buying a container cargo ship and containers, etc. Guess what? It will be of limited help, and here's why. You still have to get the ship into a port. You still have to get it unloaded, right? So today, as of earlier this week, there were something to the tune of, I think it was nearly 700 container vessels parked, not actively moving, parked off the coast of the West Coast of the U.S. Now you go, oh my God, well, guess what? There are nearly 2,000 container vessels parked off the coast of China right now because they cannot get in and they cannot get loaded.
So the same problems we're seeing, off the coast of California, that problem's exacerbated in China right now, not even being able to get things out, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So you're going to need, and here's a case of where forecasting and predictive analytics really have to help, because there are ways of actually understanding what are the gaps in not only the ports and container vessel movements, the fact that we're getting a backup in Long Beach, et cetera, but Charlotte is open so we could cross flow across the canal and go to the East Coast and be able to get them offloaded. Forecasting and analytics are still going to play a huge role in helping us work through this, because you have to look at the use of predictive analytics to help you keep ahead of understanding. Because I would love to tell you that you have the ability to look at it once every couple of weeks. No, you have to be looking at this daily, and readjusting your assortment strategies, what you're going to actually push out to the factories to make, what you're going to source in terms of materials to buy, where you're going to place and deploy inventory. All of it is much more dynamic now.
Okay, so we don't want to overbuild our inventory. You're talking about looking at things more frequently than is what you're looking at doing. Is there a chance that you get caught up in that uncertainty and the emotion of because supply chain is very emotional, I guess, but caught up in the emotion of what's going on today, that you tend to overreact on something? And how do you counteract that?
Yeah, we're in overdrive on overreaction right now, and that's also why you're seeing such pronounced out of stock positions in different categories and different product mixes. But I go back to what we were talking earlier. Your community actually can play a great role in bringing some sanity to the process. Look, the 80-20 rule and 20-80 rule obviously applies here. We have long tails on SKUs and portfolio lineups that, quite frankly, right now could be put into winter bear sleep hibernation and focus in on the ones where we really make the money for the company, to deliver the daily payroll, right? To keep the cash registers ringing. The realistic of the 18 flavors of the yogurt mix, or the 15 trail energy trail bars. Look, 3 to 4 of those constitute 80+% of the sales. You need to be focusing in on what segments are we serving on those? What is the level of volatility we're seeing on those? How do we lock down just the supply to make sure? Because guess what? We're using packaging, right? Which is in short supply. That's not only plastic, surprisingly enough, but also corrugated, right? The pandemic has done a great job of trashing a huge, thousands of containers worth of corrugated in an average day, because of everyone getting direct shipped to their homes. So you've got the ability, just by making some sanity recommendations around how we could simplify, focus in on the few creative ways forward, while we let some other things stabilize.
It's some great advice looking at SKU rationalization, and really your segmentation, I think, is going to play a critical role going forward. I mean, there's some great insights and advice there. You mentioned the packaging. I mean, if the bourbon supply chain wasn't difficult enough with its long lead times, we're seeing bottle shortages now in that industry as well, causing stockouts. Outside of Kentucky, we take care of our own first, but down in Tennessee or something, you may see problems.
There's a barrel shortage. Okay, mm-hmm. Can't get French oak. You
wow.
cannot, right? There is a cork shortage. Okay, so it's affected. There's not an industry, honestly, that I've seen. So a little early shopping advice for you. There are basic everyday medications that are going to be in short supply as we head through the fall and winter months. That, by the way, it percolated last year, but the ripple effect on that is just now beginning to show up. These are everyday. These aren't like critical medicines. These are everyday medicines that are taken. There are your Christmas toy supply for your kids, your grandchildren. If you haven't bought early, you damn well better, because you're not going to have those container vessels that are sitting are the ones that already should have been here, shipped, cleared port, been in a warehouse for distribution. They're not. And there's no way of trading that off at this point. You've got.
So what I heard then is I need to buy my bourbon now and buy in bulk. Is that what I heard then?
I always buy in bulk. It's always a great great way to do that.
Now, isn't that by definition creating the bullwhip effect? If I'm going to create safety stock inside my house because I'm worried about the shortages of corks and barrels
I only buy what
and
I
bottles.
consume, Eric, you may buy the stockpile.
Okay,
Well,
I thought by
I've limited
definition
my
we're
drinking
creating
choices
the
down to my favorites.
by definition we were creating the bullwhip effect there. I was thinking there. So, okay, so I mean, getting great advice so far. And I appreciate you saying, yes, definitely forecasting can help us, really navigate out of this. A lot of what's going on is financial decisions as well. So it's finance, predictive analytics, demand planner, supply chain. I think we all working in concert because really with higher pricing and supply chain, we're really seeing financial impacts to organizations as well.
Yeah, there's huge financial impacts of the portfolio choice. And quite frankly, we've got a tremendous amount of, I'll call it negative financial hit that's happening at the moment just simply because of poor portfolio choices, right? We're betting on the come on something to sell and we're stockpiling some ingredients, but they're for a portion of the portfolio that we don't sell on a routine basis.
So when you're looking at the additional with those finance aspects, because I mean, margins are going to start getting thinner because prices are increasing. We're definitely seeing that. You mentioned the inventory piece. I mean, how are you balancing that cost and margin and cash? I mean, once again, I'm thinking, Lori, that becomes forecasting and mix. Everything you're talking about, I think, Lori, plays into that thing, correct?
Yeah, Eric, honestly, I've seen a few of the leaders across a couple of the industry verticals that are actually doubling down where they're making smarter portfolio choices and then using this as a time when they can actually take share from others. So they are, I'll call it poaching on those that are practicing, I'll call it old school supply chain process practices where they're taking advantage of people that are bullwhipping in the wrong and leaving shelf space. And so they're filling the shelf space with fewer SKUs, but in greater quantities and sucking away demand, right? So as you know, the trade-offs for different products and different categories are different, but typically once you get a consumer to move over, you're going to see between a third to 40 something percent switch and not come back.
Wow. Okay, so we probably only have time for one more question. I want to make sure we get the important questions in here as well. So one of my final questions then for the audience, because I get this question actually a lot when they hear I'm from Kentucky. So you're the expert on this, supply chain, bringing you in. You're the expert on all things. You're expert on this as well. Here's the question. What's your favorite bourbon under $50?
Oh, well, I'm partial to a couple. I would highly recommend a Woodford Reserve, which you also like. I also am partial to a Bullet. So for $1, invested for the taste and the quality of the bourbon, those are both high-end bourbons that can be acquired for less than $50.
So you're not a purist, then it has to be straight and
No, actually, that's fine. I also encourage you to have them consider taking a small bit of a 70 or 80% cocoa chocolate morsel, and I'm just talking just a touch, barely something bigger than your thumbnail. And take that, chew that up before you take your first sip. It'll make the flavor in the bourbon explode.
All righty. See, there you go. See, now that helps out our audience. That's some information that's really going to help out our audience right there.
I highly recommend they do that before they put their next forecast together.
Forecasts are always better with bourbon.
That's right.
So, hey, I want to thank you for being part of this. Thank you for being on board. Very insightful. I said we're going through a lot right now, and it's glad to know that it's not our fault, but we can all work together to really find the solution to this. And I think SKU rationalization and really focusing on the segmentation, I think, is a key. What I got out of this, and I think it's going to be something that's definitely going to help people going forward.
Yep, absolutely. Good luck, pal.
Right. Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Alrighty.
Alrighty, bye. He didn't disappoint. That was a great interview I just did with Jake. And you can see exactly it wasn't totally forecasting fault. I'm not going to blame inventory as well, but I do want to take a second. I think inventory needs to be looked at a little bit closer, and maybe we wasn't looking at it and measuring it or setting our targets the right way when we going into this COVID. A lot of times we always look at our forecast variability, and we plan our service level accordingly. It's 2 standard deviations. 30 days generic supply against the variation of demand. The problem is it assumes everything else is a constant. And the reality of what we've seen is not. He talked about that. Variability across the board. Lead times used to be, 40, 50 days, went up to 95 to 105 days on average. One company, they saw 90-day lead times go up to 118, are now seeing over 130-day lead times for their items. 80% of what they're ordering right now is not even showing up. It's not even shipping. They're not even pretending anymore and not even shipping 20% 80% is showing up. 20% is not even showing up. Labor, that's not a constant anywhere. Either we're seeing all kinds of issues with labor at the ports, trucking, in your manufacturing. Labor is no longer a constant either. So what this adds up to is inventory not only needs to look at the variability of demand, but we need to calculate the variability of supply and bring that into the equation as well. And what that equation ends up being is basically just a service, risk, opportunity type of equation. What we're willing to pay and what we're willing to lose. That's what we need to measure. And it's not just a forecast problem, Mary. Forecast is a driver, but we really need to know end-to-end visibility, what the variability is and risk is in our supply chain. The other thing that we got at it besides segmentation, SKU rationalization, things to focus on right now is finance is going to play a bigger part going forward, and demand is going to play a much bigger part going forward now as well. To make these trade-offs and understand, we have to understand what's going to happen going forward. That becomes back to predictive analytics. That comes back to forecasting. That becomes back to demand planning. Process-wise, it's a strong s&op, IBP process. Everything we're talking about in these podcasts, guess what? The reason we've been talking about it because it is important going forward. Yes, I have a bias, but what we're seeing is playing a major role going forward in 2022 and beyond of really driving your organization. Understand inventory, understand impacts on trade-offs on strategy. Hopefully you have a little understand what's going on in the headlines brought to this podcast as well. As for me, I'm going to go pour myself a glass of Woodford. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Reach out to me. Let me know exactly what you're looking for in season 4. We can cater some of these episodes to you. Thank Arkiva for coming back, your one-plan s&op software solution. Check out IBF. I said we have been on board all through the COVID and going to continue. We got live events coming up now. Check out those as well at ibf.org. And remember, especially with these potential shortages in toilet paper and everything else going on, it's critical now more than ever. Don't forget, wash your hands.